everyone, and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann, also known as H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal, also known as Q.
And we are joined today by a very special guest. You can choose to either go by a single letter nomenclature, which we only do by necessity. We understand it is very, very uncool. But, you know, we're both a couple of Ryans. We got to differentiate ourselves somehow.
Well, I feel bad. I'm not another Ryan. We could make this a trio if I was. So that's too bad.
That's right. We got to find more Ryans. There has to be more out there.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
But for now, we'll have to settle for a Scott.
Like so many before you.
This is Scott Coogan. He lives in Seattle, where I live as well. And we both do some improv work together. So expect nonstop laughs all the way to the end of the recording.
Ooh, oh boy, wow. Pressure is
Comedians
on.
always
Wow.
love intros like that, right?
Yeah, that's
just
fantastic.
Like to set the expectations high.
Set it really high, yeah. So I can just go way even above that, right? Like way higher than no. But thank you, Ryan and Ryan.
Thank you for being here, Scott. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
What if I told you both that I do have something funny at the beginning of the show today? At least I think it's funny.
See, I wouldn't believe it personally, but what about you, Scott? Where do you stand on this?
You know, I have no reason not to believe it at this point, so I'm pretty excited. I'm excited to hear what it is.
In a big move, I'm moving halfway across the country, and I put my name into one of these Find a Mover databases, which ended up being a huge mistake. Because since I did that, I've been getting nonstop spam calls. I got on some list. It's really, really nasty. And
I think we can pretty quickly narrow down which list it is.
Yeah. And I found this app on the App Store that is called, I don't need to say the name of the app, but I will. Because maybe they'll give us money. Give us $1,000. Robo Killer.
I think we pitched that last week, actually.
That's right. Robo Killer, only on Playwright.
Delta City Underground.
I think that most of these apps usually just screen the calls, but this one has gone above and beyond. It has something called answer bots that sort of fake out telemarketers with random recordings here. And let's take a listen to one of my favorites here. I think you guys will enjoy this. So imagine you're a telemarketer, you place a call and somebody answers, and this is essentially what you hear.
You just caught me in a vocal training exercise mode. I have been training for 6 months to go on to America's Got Talent because I want to be a singer. And I'm looking for like unbiased people to listen to me sing and give me their honest and like heartfelt opinion. So like this could be kind of like The Voice, where you can't see me, but you can hear me and like give me, and you don't know me, so you can like give me like an honest opinion on whether you think my voice is nice or not. Are you cool with that?
Was he like sitting at a cotton gin as well? What is that in the background?
Yeah, it sounded like he was in a car or something, but there's a million like there's one where somebody says, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm just really off my game today. Because I actually had an alien encounter," and goes on at some length. Some of them are as long as 15 minutes long.
Wow.
It's really, really wild, but good on these people for going the extra mile of not just stopping a robocall, but really taking telemarketers to task. They say it's to prevent them from doing it to the next person.
Okay, so yeah, make the minimum wage worker's life that much harder.
Yeah. Well, hey, hopefully that person's getting paid either way.
Hey, I would fully support that product. 100%.
A Robo Killer.
Absolutely.
That is Robo Killer, presented by our community. Let's get into some video game pitches.
I like those.
That's what we're here to do. I will go first today. Back in the original Xbox, I used to own Star Wars Battlefront 2, like the proper Star Wars Battlefront 2, not the newfangled kids version of Star Wars Battlefront 2 that all those EA kids are playing today. And so what I was really interested in was the system of dogfights out in space, where you can fly around, you can shoot, you can dock inside of the larger Star Destroyers and the bigger Rebel ships, and get out of your ship and go in on foot and basically try to take that large command ship from the inside. That's kind of, I think, the only thing that Star Wars Battlefront 2 had over Star Wars Battlefront 1, which I think overall was a better game. But I've had that debate many times on many different podcasts, so I won't bring it up here. But what I want to do is explore that system again, because it's kind of not been done since, and have a system of boarding spaceships. You play as a space pirate in this 3D outer space adventure area, and basically you just kind of fly around the galaxy. You try to find large either derelict and abandoned space stations that you can enter, and there will be, puzzles or, procedural, like a dungeon or something inside of there as you're trying to find your way through this broken down old ship, and whether it's infested with aliens or whether it's just empty and full of traps and puzzles and things. Or it could be a live ship as well. You can choose to board one of those and either sneak around and steal what they have, or go in guns blazing if you're feeling lucky. And basically it's just giving yourself the freedom of flying around space, causing trouble, and making a quick buck. So I'm going to start the clock there.
Well, I really like this idea because one of my favorite things in any sort of Star Wars game is the flight. Like, Battlefront puts so much emphasis on the on-the-ground, the boots-on-the-ground combat. It sometimes, I think, loses the majesty of Star Wars. Like, I loved the old TIE Fighter and X-Wing games on PC and using a flight stick and really putzing around with those things. Thinking of a more entirely flight focused, do you see this as persistent in any way, like almost online, or is it more sort of a single player experience?
I mean, I think there's benefits to it being online. I mean, as of the time of recording, just this week, No Man's Sky went online, which is kind of interesting and was one of the big selling points for this new update. I'm sure that there's an audience for that, like a space Sea of Thieves. But I mean, for me personally, since I'm not like an online person, I could go either way. But overall, I think if this was going to be actually funded and produced, online would probably be the way to do it.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here and probably say that I'm probably one of the only people in the world that has never watched any of the Star Wars films.
Wow.
I know, right? Crazy. But, the thing that I do appreciate about them is that it is very heavily into story and lore. There's a lot of, detail that goes into just the entirety of that whole series. So, I mean, the one thing that I would say really appeals to me about your pitch is that whole aspect of exploration and discovery, and you could totally have fun with the way that's done. I mean, like, take, for example, when you go onto one of those abandoned space stations, do you find, maybe like old audio logs that talk about like the people that were there right before whatever happened caused them to leave the station? Do you find different types of inserts that kind of talk about, other space stations, or kind of link to, more about revealing what happens in the storyline? I think the biggest thing that I find the most appealing about any type of game that's set in space is the sheer size of that. I mean, there's just so much to potentially reveal that I think like somebody who's not a big Star Wars fan, would be drawn in by that whole aspect of discovery and finding different things based on the choices that you make.
Yeah, I don't think this thing has to be connected to Star Wars at all. I mean, like, totally you're inspired by Star Wars here, but I'm starting to think, wouldn't it be fun? A demo that keeps being shown at this point is the Beyond Good and Evil 2, the game that's sort of in development, and they show like a small ship and a big ship, and the small ship being able to potentially land on the large ship.
Oh.
What if you had...
now you mention it, it might be kind of a similar thing once all said and done.
Well, I'm thinking now, what if you had a Katamari-esque inspired Russian nesting doll of ships? So you're ever trying to collect larger and larger ships, but to do that, you have to board them with whatever size ship you currently possess. So you're constantly on the quest of the next size up, like large enough for you to land on or board in some way, and then take that and take it over and capture it and bring it to the next size up and continue the conquest.
Or you could also do it where whatever sorts of ships that you discover, you can also maybe scavenge them, like use some of the equipment for salvage and boost up your own customized ship, however you want, or turn around and sell it and get, access to, either money or rare materials or, make connections. I mean, you could really have a lot of fun with how you could, keep advancing that whole aspect of your own personalized ship and the customizations that you could do with it.
I think one thing that I've been a proponent of in video games for a long time that has been sadly kind of underfulfilled is destructible environments. We saw again recently Red Faction Guerrilla, which is probably still, even though it's a well-old game by this point, still probably the very best of destructible environments that's ever been done in video games, which is kind of sad because it was so long ago. And we've had so much more powerful machines since then that should be able to do that better. It just hasn't really been done yet. But I was thinking like maybe as you're stealing these ships and as you're taking them back, you can have these battles as other pirates tried to board your ship, or as the actual rightful inhabitants of the ship start to resurface, or whether aliens, stowaways, or whatever. Instead of fighting them directly, which you can do, you can choose to blow a hole in the side of the ship and either suck them out like Alien into space, or you can exit the ship yourself and then blow another hole on the other side to circle back in around them. But I want the inside and the outside world to feel persistent and connected in a way that a lot of video games don't really do, especially in space. They use that as like a quick loading screen almost. It's we only have to render what's indoors because we're indoors now. There's a first-person space survival, not survival, it's story-based, but basically you're trying to survive the erect space station out in space called Adrift, but with the I spelled with a 1, so I guess it would be a drumped or something.
Yeah, perfect.
Anyways, but it had sections where you're going through this giant space station, but there were portions of it that were destroyed. And so, you would just float outside, and then all of a sudden you're on the outside of the ship, and you could only survive for so long out there. But, theoretically, you could go to another entrance by circling around the other side of the space station, and you could, make shortcuts by traveling outside instead of going through the hallways. And so, being able to take advantage of this large space like that, I thought was pretty cool.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's an amazing feature. I mean, I agree with you. I think too many times in video games, you have too much that's just set, and no matter what you do to it, it doesn't have any effect on it. And I think one of the things that I would find really appealing about a game like that is exactly what you described. What are kind of some of the other non-traditional ways that you could board a spaceship, but also still have, repercussions on how you do that. So if you, let's say, do blast a hole in the side of the ship and it, sucks all the people out, maybe it also sucks out some of the cargo or the inventory that you could have otherwise gotten. And maybe there's a way that you can scoop it up from your ship. Maybe you've got some sort of device that can grab certain things as they exit, or, you could really have total control over how you respond to those sorts of choices that you make. So I think that would be a great idea.
And there goes the resale value if you wanted to get something for the ship you just stole.
Exactly. Yeah. But maybe you get access to other things. Maybe you get access into a part of the ship that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access if you didn't blow a hole into it.
I'm tempted here to pull in a second sci-fi series reference and say the latest J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, I think, contain more than one scene where the characters are using a pressurized chamber to leap out of the ship and try and land into another ship. So potentially blowing this hole is not just a way for, let's say the hole is not large enough for your ship to get in. It's also potentially a way for you to try and leap and board that way. And you really have to thread the needle because you could just die if you miss it with enough inertia in space.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
It's interesting. I like games, and maybe this is just me, that are, not necessarily guided by a large save the world story, but are just kind of like the experiences of one person exploring the universe and, whatever it is that they come upon. And so, I think that this would set itself apart from the Mass Effects in that, it's not trying to tell this grand narrative. It's not funneling you in any direction. Kind of the stories and experiences that you have are the story for all intents and purposes. And I know that that's kind of what No Man's Sky and Sea of Thieves was going for, to kind of mixed success with its fans. But I think there's room for something like that. Anyways, we are out of time on that one. We've gone through our 10 minutes, which does fly right by. I'd also like to mention, though, that if you're into this kind of idea, this is actually turned out to be kind of similar to something that we talked about very early on Playwright. If I am looking at the right episode with the right title associated in my mind.
Oh, take me back.
Space Junkers from Playwright 2.
Oh, yeah. I think that had another focus on co-op and potentially two people having to figure out how to pilot a ship once they were in it. But if you add that layer on to, like, every ship you get into has a new weird control scheme, and if you don't know the proper language of the species or whatever. Anyway, that's expanding the pitch, but yes.
Yeah, but I think that one was like you are playing like a space tow truck driver or something, or like a scrap collector. And so that's kind of a similar tune to it. But, even with similar pitches, we can take them in different directions. So, we never discourage ourselves from venturing down well-tread roads as long as we end up somewhere different.
Sometimes retreading down a familiar road can inspire you to find new things that you previously never noticed.
Yeah. Can lead to refinement as well. Well, we have to put the ribbon on that one, we have to come up with a name for that game. So we've got a lot of potential for puns. We have ideas of space and of piracy. Can't just use Space Junkers. Can't call it Space Junkers 2, unfortunately.
What is the, what's a name for a size of star?
A cluster?
Cluster. It's like also...
like a white dwarf or something.
White dwarf is good. Maybe even just space dwarf is pretty good.
I feel like that kind of paints a different picture, though. And I don't know if that word is... I don't know if people really like that word anymore as well.
Or you could, if you make it about the ship and the whole aspect of finding all these different ships and, like, upgrading, you could go with something, like SS Discovery or something like that, like whatever you name that ship that you start off with that you keep customizing, something. And then it could potentially have some, like, double meaning to it where, like, the ship also applies to some part of the, the game itself, an aspect of the game.
Yeah, Discovery, actually, that's not bad, especially if we spell it with a 1 where the I should be, to stay in the tradition of space games.
Oh, look at you. Clever.
Tying it back in. All right. Well, anyways, let's move on. Let's get to what our guest has for us today. Scott, what kind of a video game? I guess just to give some background on you, I guess we should have done this at the beginning of the show. The games that I associate with you tend to be like big BioWare RPGs and stuff like that. Is that a fair assessment? Like, how far do your tastes branch out from there?
Yes, that is 100% fair. I would also kind of add, like, any game that really has, like, a good story to it, I can get into. Even, there's certain even, like, first-person shooter games that have, like, great stories to them that are, really, like, I mean, they're kind of like works of art. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the old Xbox 360. There was 2 games called Condemned. And it followed this cop. Yeah, that was like, those were like great games, I mean, and talk about like moments that like genuinely were disturbing or like, would have that freak you out thing. But it's funny because, like, I mean, there's very little dialogue that you're actually like having as far as, like character development and stuff like that. It's really kind of all about like how deeper you go to kind of uncover this like, rash of craziness that's affecting the city. So Yeah, I would say games like that. Games that have good storylines, games that really kind of draw you in as far as that goes, but it doesn't have to be confined to a fantasy or any specific location type narrative.
Very cool. So what kind of a game are you bringing us today?
So with that being said, I would, I've been thinking a lot about this. There's a game that I have been kind of going through in my head for a while, and it would kind of be in the role of an RPG, except it would be one in which you actually have repercussions that are really kind of like almost like ripples in a pond, like they're affecting other things that affect other things that affect other things. And basically the way it evolves is there is a ruler who dies, who has like a bastard child. Basically, he's got like a legitimate child, but he's also got like a bastard one. And basically, what happens is on his death, he wills that a part of his kingdom, which is like completely uninhabited, there's no life. It's basically like a crap hole, gets given to this bastard. And basically, as you play as this character, as you kind of go through the game, you get access to ways to kind of improve that parcel of land. And the way that the game progresses is as you meet different people, as you kind of interact with them, as you do things for them, you can forge these alliances and kind of get these people to be a part of that area of land and help develop it. So eventually what would happen is as you play the game, and you kind of meet all these different people, they would give you access to different resources. They would start to be able to kind of build up that kingdom. But as the game would go on, it wouldn't just end there. So this wouldn't be like a strict resource gathering or like, a nonstop talking to 1,000 different characters and making the right dialogue choices. Basically what would happen is as your area grows, you can then start to grow in status and fame. And the higher you get, the more you can interact with different other higher level people within that world. So barons, counts, whoever has like kind of these powers. And basically, as you make these choices, you would have like noticeable effects. So it wouldn't be one of those games where you can just please everyone. If you make a choice one way, that would potentially limit your abilities to interact with another group because of, general petty politics. But you'd be able to basically grow your land and your boundaries by making these deals and doing these favors. So the game would kind of progress where, you'd start doing all these things for these different powers that be until eventually your kingdom becomes this sort of like very prominent place that is going to basically intrude on your rightful heirs' borders as well as your own. And it would culminate with, eventually you would go to war. But as opposed to like RPGs where basically like they give you an idea of choices and repercussions, but no matter really what you do, you wind up at the same endpoint. That wouldn't really happen in this game. If you didn't make the right choices or you didn't do different things for different people, you wouldn't just be guaranteed a win. So it would really kind of encourage a lot of playability as there would be multiple ways for you to achieve victory, but it wouldn't just be a hard, fast gimme. So that's kind of the concept behind the game itself that I was thinking of.
All right, interesting. We will start the clock there. This kind of has some flavors of Fable a little bit. I never played Fable 3, but there was an aspect of like ruling a kingdom. What I like about this, what I think really sets it apart from a lot of other games is that it follows kind of evolutionary rules. To go back to Katamari, which we referenced earlier, for a little while you're very small, you're rolling around thumbtacks and little pieces of chewing gum, and then you get a little bit bigger, and now you're rolling up cats and dogs, and the little thumbtacks, like, they're hardly even worth looking at anymore. Like, you don't even steer in that direction. And so, it's kind of like once you ascend to that next, like, social stratus to where the people that are higher up will talk to you, do you choose to keep the friends that you've made and the alliances that you've made with the people that are on the lower stratas of society? Because, maybe they might turn out to be brilliant minds someday, or they might turn out to be very useful. For now, there's also an immediate appeal to going with the people who have the benefit of a strong education and of a wealth of family inheritance.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I kind of like about this kind of concept is as you would keep evolving your kingdom, you would then start to attract different people from neighboring regions that would start coming to you. And depending on who you let in and who you kind of like interacted with, that could also have an effect on the other kind of relationships that you could interact with later on. So for example, if you, let's say, harbor a doctor who unsuccessfully was unable to deliver some baron's son, and you give him a place within your kingdom and kind of help him grow, that might have an impact on that baron's sort of interaction with you later on, as well as how many people you've been able to attract from his respective region, and so on and so on and so forth. So it would be kind of like a layered evolution, not just kind of like, well, there's choices in the beginning and then like there's really nothing else that happens afterwards. Like your choices would keep reverberating throughout the game at different points depending on what you did.
I guess I need to clarify something for a moment. Like, in your imagination, Scott, is this more zoomed out look at kingdom management, or is this more the sort of Mass Effect meets The Witcher style on the ground RPG where these decision points or inflection points are almost mapped to side quests or something? Maybe not side quests, but everything is a side quest.
Yeah, so basically it would really depend on player choice. So for example, if you have people that, you know, for instance, don't like resource grinding, well, if you made connections and you interacted with certain people, they could be your resource grinders, and they could, in essence, you know, you could give them commands and they could do that kind of thing for you. Or if you really didn't like interacting and playing the diplomat, you could meet someone and have them do it on your behalf, and then, you know, you'd find out, you know, how successful they were or how successful they weren't. It's kind of like one of those things where you kind of want to focus will kind of impact what you can do, but it's not strictly one of those things where your sole objective is to, you know, just meet and forge as many alliances as possible. Because the other thing, too, that would kind of impact into this is kind of like that real life element. So, you know, life is full of people that tell you that they're going to do something if you do something else in return for them, and then mysteriously don't. These people could be potentially no different. You could have people that you say to you in the game, hey, if you, build this wall around this particular part of my kingdom that intrudes on somebody else's land, I'll send you this. And then they don't. So then what happens then? What do you do then? Do you just ignore it? Do you just find a way to kind of access some sort of subterfuge where you steal what you wanted from them anyway? You know, it's kind of like one of those things where it would be heavily driven by the choices that the player makes and how they want to develop, or, you know, either their character, their land, or the relationships.
I think this is really cool because I'm also getting sort of mentally vibes of Reigns, Her Majesty, in this, where maybe there's a time aspect to it, and as the kingdom matures or grows, if there's an aspect to you can only accomplish so many things per year or per season, those choices and those trade-offs ultimately lead to, you know, what groups or factions or other leaders you have influence with, right? Like if you do enough things wrong to a particular leader, then it's double, triple, whatever the work to rescue that relationship because they remember those decisions rather than just, oh, you know, this year I'm going to play it like it's a total sim, and next year I'm going to play it like it's very, very much hands-on, and I'm personally carrying out these things.
Oh, absolutely. And there would totally be a time element to it because, you know, the goal would be to kind of make this kind of more realistic in terms of the everyday effects that come along with, you know, having to accomplish all these different tasks and the repercussions of, you know, making certain choices versus not doing certain things. So, for example, if, let's say a nobleman said, hey, I'm having some problems with these bandits that are ravaging my trade routes. If you take care of them, you know, I'll give you X, Y, and Z. Well, if he offers you that, there's obviously going to be like a timeline for that. So you can't just put it off until the end of the year and be like, oh, okay, well, I've got the manpower. I think I'll right. jump in and help out. Because at that point, you know, maybe it's too late, you know, like everything has been pillaged and now he's really pissed off. So he's going to be less likely to interact with you, and kind of what you were saying, you're going to have to do more work to try to salvage the relationship.
There's a video game, I'm not entirely sure that I'm referencing the right one. I have a mechanic in my head, but I am only like 70% sure that I'm attributing it to the right games. So, take it with a grain of salt. But what I'm going to reference is 2 games called King Arthur, the role-playing war game, in which it's kind of like a total war type of game. You're controlling armies and going up against other armies, but there's also a role-playing aspect where you can influence the outcome of battles and of alliances and broken alliances through the kind of dealings of the upper crust of society, of the royalty, of the nobility, by marrying into the right family or that kind of thing. And so I'm interested in the way that people on these different social stratas interact is like qualitatively different from tier to tier, that there's all sorts of like machinations that go on at the higher levels that would be almost utterly meaningless on the lower levels. And so it really kind of changes how you deal with people on each level.
Oh, yeah, or how you solve a problem. Like if you've got some sort of issue happening and you're really tight with, let's say, your bodyguards or your soldiers, they might, if you talk to them, they might say, hey, listen, this is what I think you should do. And then if chance you talk to like, your noble friends or your courtiers or whatever, then they might give you different advice. And depending on who you listen to, what you do, that kind of thing, can determine your success. I mean, maybe the answer isn't just one option versus another. Maybe it's a combination of 2 or 3. Maybe it's a matter of doing multiple steps and different things in order to get the best possible outcome.
Yeah.
I feel like there's been a large push recently for the Banner Saga games, a bunch of new fans springing up as the 3rd game is being released. And that one is also kind of a choice-based RPG game where you're a Viking crew kind of traveling across the land, migrating somewhere else and encountering all these different battle scenarios. So yeah, I think that there's definitely an interest in this type of game. The biggest challenge that comes with branching storylines is obviously the sheer volume of writing that would be required to pull it off. And so, other than just getting somebody to write multiple novels worth of text, can we think of like a really like clever way to do this, like either really economically or procedurally or something to give this world a feeling of unpredictability even on repeat plays?
Well, they've sort of done that already, in certain games. If you look at some of the big blockbuster games that have had mixed success, Mass Effect Andromeda comes to mind. Those are games where, God only knows the amount of sheer dialogue and, writing and voice acting. It's something like thousands and thousands of pages. And, in terms of the randomly generated world, they've kind of done that already in certain aspects of certain games. There's some where you can kind of, you start again and, you face different types of enemies or different types of quests or different types of challenges depending on who you start as or, where you go first or that kind of thing. In my mind, I kind of picture it as sort of like one of those things where it's almost like a little bit of branching paths so that you don't have like 500 different things that you could, potentially do, but maybe like 5. But within that, maybe the arcs of each of those could touch each other at different points. So you wouldn't have to have like, if I say no versus yes versus maybe versus how about later versus, you wouldn't have to have that degree, but you could do it in such a way where, let's say one path takes you this way and one path takes you this way. Maybe that one path hits the first path, but then veers back to the second path. So it's like, depending on how you sort of, interact and what you do and when, it doesn't have to branch out into a million different directions.
And just on the point of economics of how to make something like this work, like I could see there's a version of this that plays out more like a board game to me. There's like, there's a lot of popular, almost like long-term or locked in. I'm thinking of Pandemic Legacy and these sort of things, board games where the choices matter. You're actually marking up the board and you get sort of one long-term run at it. if these things are served up in terms of cards that are, shorter, pithier, packed with graphics, I think you can do more with less from a storytelling standpoint if you were to think of it in that way.
Oh, absolutely. And they have games like that. There's that one game, I forgot the name of it, that came out actually a couple of years ago, and they just released the sequel, and it's kind of like a tarot fortune telling game where you're playing this card master who's kind of revealing your fortune. And as he puts down these different cards, you're making these.
Fate. Is that the one?
That's it. That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, Hand of Fate. And that's kind of like that too. You get different cards, different playthroughs, different choices will impact kind of what happens next. There's multiple ways to kind of get to the end game. But kind of what what Ryan Q was saying before is that whole thing. It's very like texturalized. There's like, a card and a picture and some text, and you make a choice and it does something, and then you move on. So yeah, you could totally do it that way. Absolutely.
All right, well, that is all the time we have there. We have to now wrap this one up by giving it a name.
So I kind of thought about this a lot, and I couldn't really come up with something really that clever. The only thing that kind of came to mind was something called like Monarch or something, and then because it kind of develops, this whole thing of can the bastard cast-off become an actual ruler, or does he fail, or she fail, whoever it happens to be.
I feel like to add the additional fantasy spin on it, I would love to have like the subtitle Monarch, heavy as the crown or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that would be good. I like that.
Yeah, nothing to add. Great. Good job, guys. All right, we're moving now to a pitch from the community. Every week we take one pitch from our community. They write in either at our email address, playwrightcast@gmail.com, our website, playwrightcast.com/pitch, or our Twitter @playwrightcast. We take pitches from any and all of those locations. And thanks to Q going on GameScoop recently, we've had an influx of new listeners and an influx of new voices in our inbox, which is very exciting. Not that we don't appreciate hearing from the regular voices every time. They are consistently impressive in a way that's, even though we do this job every week, and I'm still like kind of jealous of some of the ideas that they come up with. Like, wow, that's clever.
Yes, and we've been working with the Riddler from Batman Forever to try and develop some sort of helmet mind beaming pitch technology, but we think that's years out. So continue to write in either through email, Twitter, or the website.
We have a pitch here today from a listener named Ocean, who says, "So you are an old man and the world is ending and you need to go on your last quest to save the world. As you are going through it, it's kind of like Zelda Breath of the Wild, where you're going to destinations and you're remembering previous experiences and get a certain amount of points at the end of it by playing through those flashbacks to get power-ups, and it changes the future. In the middle of the final boss fight, you find out it's impossible to overcome, but you get one last flashback and you remember his weakness. You finally defeat him and save the world, and you soon die a peaceful death as a hero to humanity." All right, there we go. We are dealing with the ideas of memory and adventure, so there's a lot to work with here. Let's see where we can take it. We're starting the clock.
I love the idea of attempted and probably have pitched ideas about memory and
I think
aging.
we've done the loss of memory before.
Yeah, but
I
this
don't
is
know if we've ever pitched like recalling memories. That's kind of a different perspective. So
exactly.
That's interesting.
So I'm wondering here, in my head, this feels like, let's go super video game direction for a moment. What if memories are essentially almost like in Hollow Knight, you have those like individual chunks of health.
Mm-hmm.
And in Zelda, you have the individual hearts. I wonder if you had a magic pool, quote unquote, a memory pool that worked very much like that, where in any given moment, going into a flashback state is more like seeing another layer of the world.
Yeah, right.
And seeing something as it was rather than how it is now. And that would be a very interesting way to solve puzzles, defeat enemies, a lot of different things.
Yeah, the thing that I like the most about this pitch is that whole aspect of the memories and the interactions with them. There's a great game called Break Chance Memento, which basically deals with a similar thing. You play as this character whose brother dies, and he's given the ability to kind of go back to certain time frames, and the choices that he makes can basically have an impact on the future. And the thing that I like very much about this pitch is that, it would really kind of help to kind of flush out that character, and you potentially could maybe see how they were, what they went through at different points in their life, and the decisions that they made. And yeah, I really kind of admire that. I think that's something that's missing from a lot of video games today, this whole aspect of being able to look back and being able to kind of see, what happened and experience it. Most of the games today are all about, like an objective. You start here and you get here. And the journey is what you do along the way, as opposed to maybe that's important, but maybe there's a journey to be had on what you already went through.
That's interesting. I think one of the things that makes memory difficult as a mechanic to work with is that the human experience of memory is that memories come to you unexpectedly. Sometimes, just the weirdest things will trigger them, like a smell of a certain food that you used to have at your grandma's house or something will trigger memories. Memories are unpredictable by nature to a degree. You can like play certain songs and like put yourself in a certain state like predictably, but I think it's interesting if, like Ocean describes in the pitch here, that you're fighting this final boss, you find out that the fight is impossible, and then all of a sudden a memory, flashback comes about and you're able to uncover the weakness. What if this character that you're fighting, to give it an appropriate end of the world scenario, is essentially this planet's god, so to speak, and it exists simultaneously like outside of time, like it's kind of more powerful than that. And so, every warrior that has fought it has turned up completely underpowered and unable to defeat it. And it's coming to the point of its mission to end the world, to where, things are looking pretty imminent. No one has been able to defeat it. They all get discouraged once they discover that, their most powerful attacks aren't doing anything against this god creature. They turn away discouraged, but this one character keeps going back and fighting it time and time again. And so it's tapping into memories and flashbacks from all of these previous experiences of going on this same adventure and fighting the same thing. Even though you don't actively remember, you can't simultaneously exist in all these spaces. You have to find some sort of a trigger to get you back there. But it is the combined power of attacking this being outside of time at multiple points in time at once.
Interesting.
To finally defeat it.
I like that. And I think you hit on a really good point there. Something that I think would kind of have a really cool appeal in this concept. How much time do you spend in the memories, and how does that impact your final battle? Is it one of those things where the more time that you spend in the memories, you become kind of more lost, like you lose more about yourself, like kind of in the real world, or do you become stronger because you're able to kind of remember more the more you discover in that area, and that gives you additional strength at the end,
I would like if there was some sort of a way to trigger these memories. It's like if in Dark Souls, as you're going throughout the world, sometimes you'll see shades of other characters, other players that are just not recordings. They're like live other players out in the world that are just like ghosts running around in your world, and you kind of see where they are. And they kind of fade in and out of existence. So maybe something like that, where as soon as you find a trigger, then you see a past version of yourself. And based on the trigger you find the young child version of yourself going on his first adventure, the young adult, the middle-aged man, the old man now that you are. And so, you have to solve different puzzles by kind of utilizing the memories of the things that you've done in the past, and almost like these recordings that are kind of stuck and locked in time of past experiences.
Like Ocean was talking about, even Breath of the Wild itself is a game about memories and about the past and how it manifests its story. But I'm wondering if memory also can't be tied to a system like in Final Fantasy VII. If you get hit enough times, you take enough damage, a character reaches their limit, and they get a limit break, which is a special move. So what if it's specific things that a boss does, or specific enemies, or like you said, specific locations, so it smells, and something that would trigger a memory like a human experience of it. But then, bouncing off the Scott idea here, you have to disembody in a way to live in the memory state and use that resource. And so your physical body is vulnerable and exposed, but the longer you can stay in that state where you're recalling the memory, the more about the world you have the opportunity to look at and analyze and potentially like live in that space. So if you have that moment where, okay, I have to break free of my body, and your body just kind of goes into the stunned recollection state, it's daydreaming essentially.
Yeah.
Now you have to, now you get to scramble to soak in what you think the puzzle is, or maybe you're seeing the younger version of the boss and you're seeing the move that they used to have, but in your old age it appears too quick or something for you. Like really play up the gap in abilities between a young and an old version of yourself.
You know, there's a lot of games where you travel through time or like bend space in a way to transform what's around you. We've referenced before, Titanfall 2 has a really excellent portion of the game where you're able to kind of like zap yourself forward and backward in time at the press of a button. But in that sense, you're not really leaving something behind that is also at risk. And so it's interesting as you are managing these two characters. It's almost like a Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, where you're kind of managing the well-being of two characters at once. They're just kind of, instead of being physically right next to each other, they are inhabiting the same or very similar space, just at different points in time.
The old man and the young memory.
Yeah, I think the thing that I find really kind of also fascinating with this whole concept and a lot of what you guys have said is that whole aspect of everybody has good memories and everybody has bad memories, right? So we as a society, I mean, psychologically, we are always kind of have a tendency to remember the bad and forget the good. So in this game, you could potentially play into that in, you know, a number of different ways. Maybe if you explore those bad memories, there are different things that can kind of happen to you in the present that can kind of benefit you later on. Or maybe if you just spend too much time in the good memories remembering things that were, or potentially remembering the things that you remember them being, but maybe that's not how they were, you know, that could potentially have some sort of, you know, repercussion on that end boss, that god deity type thing that you're facing off with. So I think there's just so many ways you can go with it.
Yeah, I really would also like to see something like a punctuation after defeating a boss that's tonally something, maybe Shadow of the Colossus, where you're learning about a backstory. Maybe you, the warrior, have actually wronged this person at some point, and now in your current state, everything seems senseless and like, why are people coming after me? And only after defeating the enemy, you're able to recall the initial conflict or what happened between you or why this other person got in that state.
Gosh, we're just kind of barely unlocking this idea. I feel like there's a lot there. There's a lot of different places we can go with this, but we are out of time. It always creeps up on us. I mean, there is still a lot to unpack here. And so if you're interested in further exploring this, we have comment sections below each of the episodes on our website. And we'd encourage anyone to just kind of go in and throw in, like, where else would you take this? Like, where have we gone wrong? And where would you take the idea in different directions? Or where would you expand on it from here? You know, this idea is still very much alive and still very much out there. And so if anyone is inspired by it, then please continue to create. That's all that we're here for, ultimately. Ocean does come in with a name. The idea is called a recall. And I think that ends up working out pretty well. That's nice.
That's so funny. I was literally just thinking that would be the best name for that game. That's so funny. Awesome.
There we go. It's
Syncing
almost,
up right there.
Yep,
that's awesome.
almost like a memory of a pastime.
Right? It's how I
Deja
remembered
vu.
it. Exactly.
That one was emailed to us at playwrightcast@gmail.com. You can write on our website, playwrightcast.com/pitch, or you can tweet us, playwrightcast @playwrightcast. That is how Twitter works. And in all those instances, it is PLAYWRITECAST.
Yes, it's a very good pun. And I'm sure while Ocean was typing up their pitch, they probably were listening to our theme song, Hello World, by PROTODOME. It's off the album Blue Noise. It's that chiptune music that you hear every episode. Don't you want to just go check out what more of that sounds like? I do.
Anyways, that brings us just about to the end of the show. Again, we want to give a big thanks to Scott Coogan. Do you want to point anyone towards anything either online or offline if they happen to be in Seattle? Like, use the platform to make people aware of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll totally shameless plug myself. So if any of the listeners today are in the Seattle or surrounding area, and they are in the mood to laugh and be inspired by random acts of different levels of funniness, I guess, check us out at spanktheblank.com. We perform throughout the different Seattle and surrounding areas in various different venues. So if you're interested in kind of taking a look, check us out or send us an email.
We should have found a way to pitch a game that was called Spank the Blank. Maybe.
Oh, yeah. Well, repeat appearance maybe at some point.
Yeah. Oh, there'd probably be all these different connotations, suggestion-wise, that you'd get, I'm sure.
We're okay with connotations. We're happy to take it in whatever direction the inspiration blows.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. I think it's getting late. Q, why don't you take us out of the show today with a miniature pitch, just something to think about during the week.
Sure. You are running an improv theater, and your job is to attract an audience with good suggestions.
Okay.
Oh, I totally want to hear about those suggestions.
Very good. Well, we will see you again next week.
Bye.